Welcome to Easy Peasy Books, From Author to Authority, the lively and engaging podcast for business professionals who've always believed they have a book in them. I'm your host, Gillian Whitney. Join me as I chat with authors and industry experts from all around the world to explore simple strategies to write, publish, and leverage your business book. Whether you're an entrepreneur, executive, or an employee, this podcast is for you. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another edition of the Easy Peasy Books podcast. Today, I want to talk about something that almost nobody prepares authors for. And honestly, it's something I see people trip up all the time, whether they're brand new authors or people who've been published for quite a while. It's this: how do you actually talk about your book? I actually had this come up just recently in a way that kind of got me to thinking I needed to do an episode of it. I had reached out to a prospective guest to come on my podcast, and I just wanted him to share his author's journey. He was so excited about the opportunity, but then a couple days later, he came back to me and said he's an introvert and he just didn't feel comfortable talking about his book and declined my invitation. Now, as a fellow introvert, I completely understand that feeling. I really do. Introverted authors are much more comfortable writing a book than they are marketing a book. Sitting down and getting the words on the page, easy peasy. That's the comfortable part. But talking about your book to other people, that's a whole other thing. But here's what I want to say to every introvert out there who has ever had that reason to stay quiet about their book. Being an introvert is actually not the problem. And I know that might surprise you. So what's the real problem? I'm so glad you asked. Now, think about it. You wrote the book. You know everything that's in it. And yet, I cannot tell you how many times I have watched authors who are smart, accomplished, experienced people freeze up the moment that somebody asks them, "Hey, what's your book about?" They start explaining, over-explaining, going in circles. They try to cover everything, and somehow they end up saying a lot without actually saying anything. So if that sounds familiar, then this episode is really going to resonate for you. And I promise, by the end, you are going to have a really simple way to talk about your book that actually works for you. Okay, so when I talk to authors about this, the first thing they say is, I just need to practice my why buy this book pitch a little bit more. Or they say, I just need to get better at being interviewed. Look, while those things aren't wrong, it's my experience that that's not the real issue. The real issue is clarity. And here's what I mean. Most business professionals who write a book have spent years, sometimes decades, building up their expertise. They have stories, they have frameworks, they have client examples, they have lessons that they've learned the hard way, and all of that stuff is rattling around in their head. And so when somebody asks, "So, what's your book about?" their brain tries to do the entire book justice all at once. They want to make sure they mention all of the frameworks, all of the stories, and all of the client results, and actually all of the chapters. Are you seeing where I'm going with this? I actually wrote about this in my most recent book, What Book Should I Write? I talk about how the problem for most authors isn't that they don't have enough ideas, it's that they actually have too many. And the same thing happens when you try to explain what your book's about. Authors aren't stuck because they don't know their material. They're stuck because they know too much of it. And here's what I want you to really understand. Clarity and completeness are not the same thing. In fact, when you're trying to explain everything That often makes people understand less. Your job when somebody asks you what your book is about is not to summarize every chapter. Instead, your job is to help the right person quickly understand three things: who is the book for, what problem does it solve, and why it matters. That's it. Just those three things. Okay, so let me tell you about the biggest mistake I see. Authors describe the content of their book instead of the transformation. They say things like, my book's about leadership, communication, mindset, productivity, and personal growth. And we're sitting here thinking, okay, but what does that actually do for me? What changes are going to happen to the reader after they finish reading your book? Because here's the truth, especially for people who buy business books, they are not buying a table of contents. They're buying a result. They want to solve a problem. They want to avoid a mistake that they've been making. And they actually want to reach a goal that's been feeling out of reach for too long. So when you lead with your chapter topics, you're answering a question that nobody's actually asking. Nobody woke up and said, I really need a book with 5 chapters on leadership. Instead, they woke up and said, I'm struggling to get my team to actually follow through on anything I'm telling them. That's the real problem that your reader wants solved. So think of it like this. Your readers care a lot less about what's in chapter 3 and a lot more about how their life or business is going to be different once they've finished reading your book. So let me give you something really practical here because I like to make things easy peasy. When somebody asks what your book is about, I want you to just remember 3 things. Number 1, who is it for? Number 2, what problem are they facing? Number 3, what changes after they read it? Who is it for? What's the problem? What's the result? That's it. That's the whole thing. And honestly, once you can answer those 3 questions clearly, so much of your marketing is going to get easier. Not only your podcast interviews will get easier, but writing LinkedIn posts will get easier. Maybe going back and looking at your Amazon book description will get easier. And maybe even your website copy is going to get easier. That is clarity, because all of that stuff is really just the different ways you answer those same 3 questions. Now, I just want to clarify something. When I say who your book is for, I want to address something that I hear authors say all the time. But Gillian, my book is for everyone. I get it. You worked hard on your book and you want to reach as many people as possible. But here's what I've learned. When you think about your book being for everyone, it's actually for no one. You have to drill down and really think about who's that one person that needs your book. And I liken this to when I placed a Facebook ad. Several years ago, we were selling our house in Utah, and we were living in the north of Utah, up in the mountains in a small little college town, Logan, Utah. And we needed to put our house on the market, and it wasn't selling very good. And so we were having an open house, and I decided to boost the visibility of the open house by taking out a Facebook ad. So when I went to take out a Facebook ad, I had never done this before. I've never done it since. But when I took out a Facebook ad, I decided anybody could like our house. Our house was a beautiful house. And so I went to Facebook and I put in all the parameters to do this ad. And I realized, oh my gosh, this ad is going to cost so much money. And that's when I realized that you have to take the circle of all the people that you think your house is for and start narrowing it down. So that got me to thinking, well, in reality, for an open house, how far are people really going to come to see my house on a Saturday? So here I was in Logan, Utah, and I started thinking about, well, people are probably not going to drive in from New York or California or even Nevada. And so I narrowed it down to probably about 90 minutes, 60 to 90 minutes, which meant from Logan, the furthest we would reach out would be going down south to Salt Lake City and going north to the border of where we hit Idaho. So that kind of gave us our circle of location. So that was great. That made that Facebook ad get a little bit smaller, but it was still going to be ridiculous. So I began thinking about what else could help me narrow down the audience for this ad. So then I began thinking about who is my house really for? Not just who would come to the open house, who would actually buy the house? And I began thinking about what are some of the characteristics. So first of all, our house had 3 bedrooms upstairs, and the downstairs area, because it was a 3-story house, and the downstairs area, we actually had a separate guest room with its own ensuite bathroom, which could actually be another bedroom, or it could be it could be rented out, or it could be used for guests like what we did. But it could also be, a 4th bedroom as well. So that was something to think about. So then I recognized, okay, probably our house is made for families. It's not going to be a house that attracts a single person, a couple who's never going to have children, or a couple who are, empty nesters. They would not be attracted to our house. That wouldn't make sense for them. So I narrowed it down to families. And I thought about, okay, that now puts an age limit on our house. And you could actually at that time choose that you wanted it to be married couples, and you wanted it to be couples with families and kids and young kids, and et cetera, et cetera. So I went through all these things. I recognized that we had a big multi-purpose room on our 3rd floor we used it as a homeschooling room, but it could make us an excellent sewing room, or, a hobby room. So that was another thing that I began to see, okay, people would like that. We also had a backyard. So I recognized that's going to take a lot of mowing of the lawn. And again, those were more parameters that I could start narrowing down our Facebook audience more and more and more. So by the time I was done, this was an affordable Facebook ad because I had narrowed it down. And I often like to think about figuring out your who. Think of you're an archer, and you have a bow and arrow, and you have a target, and you're looking at that round target. You're aiming for the red dot in the center. And so that's what you're aiming for with your book. Think about those people that are dead in the center. And guess what? Sometimes the other people will naturally fit into your book because they're the outer rings. They'll just find your book naturally. But you don't aim for the outer rings. You always aim for the dead center. So I think that's really important. Just remember, thinking about the who of your book is always thinking about who's that ideal person, because your book is not for everyone. It's for a certain target reader. And the more that you think about that, the better you're going to be able to speak on podcasts and interviews and et cetera, because you're now envisioning the real person your book is for. Because clarity is what makes your book shareable. When people understand exactly who a book is for and what it does, they can send it to the right people. They can recommend it. They can buy it as a gift. If they walk away from a conversation going, I'm not totally sure what that book is about, guess what? Your book is going nowhere fast. Let me show you the difference this can make, because I think it's sometimes easier to understand using a real example. So here's how a lot of authors would describe their book. My book talks about confidence, networking, visibility, personal branding, and career growth. That is so broad that how would I know what's in it for me? So let's try reframing that. This book is for professionals who feel overlooked in their industry and helps them get more visible so they can start attracting the opportunities they've been waiting for. Do you hear the difference? Now we know exactly who it's for. We know the challenge they're facing, and we know what they're going to walk away with at the end. That's clarity, and clarity is what creates a connection to your reader. So I'm going to use my own book as an example here because I think it's only fair that I put myself through the same exercise that I'm asking you to do. So here's my book that I recently published. What book should I write? I could describe it like this. My book covers topic selection, content inventory, decision-making frameworks, scorecards, and evaluation tools. Technically, that's all true, but would that description make you want to pick up my book and buy it? Probably not. So here's a clearer version. My book is for business professionals who've been saying, I want to write a book for years, but feel stuck with trying to pick a topic. It helps them confidently decide what book to write first. And now the right reader will immediately recognize himself. They'll think, oh, that's me. I've been saying I'm going to write a book someday forever, and yet I just can't decide what to write about. And that is exactly the person I wrote my book for. That's the difference between explaining a book and positioning a book. And I think it's one of the most important things any author can learn to do. Now, I want to take a second and just acknowledge something. Authors struggle with this because our books are personal. If you're like me, you probably spent months, maybe years, thinking about your topic. You probably agonized over certain chapters. You reworked things. You added stories. You took stories out. And you want people to appreciate how much depth went into writing your book. But guess what? When you try to communicate all that information, people just get lost. The clearest books to describe are often the easiest books to recommend because people immediately understand the value. They don't have to work to figure out if it's for them. There's actually a line I like to use when I coach my clients. I say, your first book doesn't need to be perfect or profound. It just needs to be the right book for right now. And I think that same philosophy applies to how you talk about your book. You don't need the perfect explanation. You just need a clear one. And so here's something practical I'd love if you could try after you finish listening to this episode. Grab a notebook or open a document or write on a sticky note, whatever works for you, and complete these 3 sentences. My book is for ... They are struggling with ... After reading this book, they will ... That's it. Those 3 little sentences. And here's one rule for this exercise. Do not list chapter topics. Instead, I want you to focus on the reader. Focus on their problem. Focus on their transformation. And now, if that exercise turns out to be a little bit harder than you were expecting, I actually think you should take that as a good sign. Because sometimes figuring out how to talk about your book will help you get a clearer idea of what your book is really about. And that clarity work is never, ever wasted. I've been helping people write and publish books for a while now, and I know firsthand that books create visibility. But they can only do that if people understand what your book is about and why it should matter to them. Your book is not something to explain in exhaustive detail every time somebody asks you. Instead, it's something that you position clearly enough that the right person hears about it and thinks, that book is exactly what I need. So if you've ever felt a little tongue-tied trying to explain your book, whether it's on a podcast, at a networking event, or even just with a friend over a cup of coffee, I hope this episode has helped you. You don't need a polished pitch. You don't need to memorize anything. You just need to be clear about who the book is for, what problem it solves, and what changes after somebody reads it. That's enough, really. And the more clearly you can talk about your book, the more likely it is to find its way to the reader who needs it the most. And isn't that the reason that you wrote your book in the first place? All right, everybody, that's it for me today. I hope to see you back here next week. Thank you for tuning in to this edition of Easy Peasy Books, From Author to Authority. If you found value in today's episode, I'd be grateful if you could leave us a review. It helps other aspiring authors discover our podcast. To learn more about writing, publishing, and leveraging your business book, visit my website at easypeasybooks.com.